Let's get on the phone lines now and speak to Adam Senanu, an anti-corruption crusader. He joins us on this developing story. Thank you very much, Adam, for your time. So we've had the back and forth when this story early on broke on Joy FM. We've had a communications minister come out to state our government's position on the matter. What do you make of this?
Good evening, and good evening to your listeners. I think that the challenge we have here is that if you read Article 284, it clearly states that a public officer shall not put himself in a position where his personal interest conflicts or is likely to conflict with the performance of the functions of his office. We may not have enough detail now to the extent that there is no evidence that the president was directly involved in these processes. However, there appears to be some kind of poor judgment in accepting this kind of gift, particularly if you consider the timing. Once the contractor had been involved in a process leading to winning a contract, there was every likelihood that he was going to be engaged in subsequent tender processes. And the giving of a gift when this process had already started to the first and foremost citizen of the land, I think it's something that nobody should have accepted that kind of gift, because it places the president, even if at that point he was a vice president, as a public officer, in a potential situation of a conflict of interest, to the extent that we have an executive presidency that directs the ministers and their subordinates. So I think that whereas there is no direct evidence on a conflict of interest to the extent that he was involved in the process, because we are also talking about the likelihood, the president should have been far above this, and those who received that gift or even put it in the pool ought to have thought much better about this and rejected that gift.
It's early days here, Mr. Senanu, and I guess the story is still developing. But when you listen to the arguments or the debates throughout the day, a lot of people have raised curiosity about the fact that this gentleman in question is about to be awarded yet another contract, and it appears it's going to be on a sole sourcing basis. Do you think it's about time we take a second look at the Public Procurement Act itself, especially on sole sourcing, because it appears a lot of the conditions, that go for sole sourcing are not really satisfied?
Our experience has been that it is not the public procurement law itself, because even in the single source, the conditions for single sources are quite explicit and sufficient to deal with the potential misuse. I think there's a lack of due diligence and following up on the necessary processes. Indeed, as if I'm right, the procurement has already been revised recently. I think it is more about the supervisory rules and the due diligence that ought to be done. And the question is, do we have transparency on what processes were followed to arrive at the conclusion that there should be a single source contract? And that's what we should be looking at. So if the information is made available, and that's what citizens should be demanding, there should be transparency. Let us have the documentation leading to the decision that this ought to be a single source procurement. The timing of all of this is wrong. As we all know, the president lost his mother yesterday. But I think that there are specific and substantive issues to be answered. And the communication minister and others ought to be providing much more detail, because the timing just is suggestive of things not going right in terms of our systems and processes.
All right, thank you very much. I'm afraid we've got to leave it here. Mr. Senanu is an anti-corruption campaigner helping us to deal with this issue, this developing story.